Have a lot of really good speakers, and I'm going to just ask each one of them to introduce themselves, give a little bit about their background, and then we'll get into some of the discussion questions and topics.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for having us on this panel today. My name is Manny Marquez, and I'm the Vice President of Nightclub Security Consultants. And we're a company that specializes in primarily training for hospitality security professionals, as well as helping our clients mitigate liability when it comes around, namely use of force issues and that sort of thing.
Jason Swanson with Patronscan. I'm the Director of Sales. I've been in the document security business for 17 plus years and looking forward to talking a little bit about the ID verification solutions that are being used to use technology to help create that safe, vibrant nightlife.
Next, longtime colleague of mine, Bob Pomplin.
Jim, thank you so much for having me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. I started Loss Control Services in 1985. I'm still doing presentations, and I started an online program about 10 years ago, and that's servingalcohol.com, and I think we're in about 20 states right now.
I think that the pandemic has created a layer of complexity. The fundamentals remain the same. Now there's just more responsibility in the hands of security to make sure that both the employees and the patrons are kept safe. A lot of that comes in terms of, we have new rules and in-house regulations that we're trying to enforce, namely for face masks, social distancing, that sort of thing. We have to be under the mindset that we're going to have to deal with more issues on our own and have some sort of protocol in place to deal with situations as they occur. In terms of fundamentals, it goes always back to the right hiring policies, proper training, having the right management staff, having the proper number of guards on duty at the time to deal with what you would expect to see on that. So, it's fundamentals are the same. It's just, it's shifted a little bit.
I'm going to ask Jason, because Jason, you offer the technological aspect of age in particular, but I think you also see the role of security or safety or control as part of the function of how your tools are used. So when you're working with people and orienting them to the tools that you have to make their job more efficient, do you see them as a point of control, a point of security, or a point of safety?
Well, that's an interesting point of view. We look at it more on the prevention and accountability side. So that's kind of how we look at it. And when you look at back to the lack of policing and certain things due to cutbacks, some of the problems we've seen where, we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick on crime throughout the pandemic, particularly like liquor stores, telecom. There's a bunch of other industries that have seen some of this uptick, in tough times, people act a little differently, so, and according to our data, about 95% of these problems usually come from 1% of the people. So, when you think about that kind of thing, and then we have the ID scanning solution, obviously it's to keep the underagers out, make sure that those are valid IDs. But on top of that, when you think about the 86 list and some of those things, is there are some people that can make the night terrible for everybody else. So if you have a tool that can prevent those people, or where you can make an educated decision based on maybe a shared flag network that is shared between all our systems, then you can start making an educated decision on whether to let them in or not. So again, those could be consistent of a private flag just within your network, or you can send it out to a public, which is shared amongst all the nightclubs in the region. So again, that's more of a community-driven approach to safety, and it just make you aware of the troublemakers ahead of time, again, to protect your staff, your guests, and your business. Then there's the accountability side, which is then because you've now scanned your information, there's a live image captured. So, the reason you have the live image is a lot of times that there's the ID, but how many people look just like their ID anymore? So we've all changed what you're wearing that night. So very specific story is a girl was assaulted And she came back in, she didn't remember anything that happened other than he was wearing a red hoodie. So quickly going through his scan history, you're able to find the individual and present that information to the police in a timely manner, to actually making that person accountable to their actions. Then we start talking about behavioral change, because they know they're accountable to their actions. They know that that's there. So then you start seeing whole communities, and Sacramento, I'll point to, because they've actually implemented in, like, I think it's 31 different bars in their community. There's a huge success. Las Vegas, Fremont Street, literally was able to drive out some of that unwanted, that 1%ers that we're talking about. Vancouver had shootings up to 95 per year in the downtown core, down to 11. And a lot of that they contribute to just the accountability of the system. So I'll kind of stop there, but that's how I kind of see it, is more on the prevention and accountability side.
And so what I hear you saying is that basically your technology is a control point. It's where you're filtering through to assure people are of the right age, or if they've been identified in previous situations. And as Tina from Sacramento pointed out, the whole idea of flagging somebody may not be legal in every state. But the idea is to be able to notify, or at least to have some method to identify people. And then from a kind of a crime reconstruction perspective, the technology can help in solving crime if there are any follow-up sexual assault incidents or violence incidents that occur. Bob, what, in addition, I think Manny brought up the fact that you're going to have to have more focus on the outdoor areas, whether you have expanded patio spaces in parking lots or out onto the street with taking over street level parking to have outdoor capacity. But isn't this adding just another dimension as it relates to underage access and crowd management and disturbance management that security will have to pay attention to, rather than just the point of entry security?
A couple things. First of all, the outside area is going to be an issue, especially with outside dining. The amount of people now you've got now the street and the street people and the street traffic to protect your diners from their interruptions, and that can be sort of hectic. Your security a lot larger that you're going to need just to provide that, let alone for the spacing. If that still is a continuance in lines, it's going to be a mess for nightclubs and large venues when people are coming in. You're going to have a greater expectations of security that are going to be needed to maintain safety. And the communication aspect of your staff and your security talking to people coordinates the opportunity of finding where troubled spots are. The more communication you have with your customers, the better able you are to determine where the risks are coming from, because you have more customers than you do employees. And the fact that the customers feel comfortable, you build up a friendship, starts to build a family, gives them a reason to come back, makes them feel comfortable. And that's the key issue of creating a new generation, but it's a new generation of people coming. Now, a lot of the millennials and Generation Z don't communicate that well, or that often. Let's put it that way. They're used to their phones, and phones have completely changed the way that people communicate. So, you have to take more time. We do what's called a HAP principle, which is we HAP them: help, assist, and protect. Every action any security person ever does at all times is to help a person, to add and assist them if you need help, and to protect them, either at times from themselves or other people.
What do you envision the challenges will be with security and weapons and entry into venues?
Well, I think what people need to understand is that despite what either state or local law dictates, you as a business owner have the right to establish your own rules and to be able to enforce those rules. And I think the important part is just making sure that you're communicating the expectation to the guest well before they get to the front door. it's going to be challenging for owners to deal with those sorts of things. In the end, it just depends on what sort of establishment you want to have and what you want to allow or not allow. And I think that's just one, training of your team members, two, training of your guests, like Bob was saying earlier. And I think that additional risk of guns within a venue or outside of a venue, I think it's always going to exist. And it's going to be very tough for business owners or business districts to completely control that. So the next best thing is knowing how do you respond to those situations. And the answer comes through training, communication with your local law enforcement, and making sure that you have some sort of protocol in place that you can implement to deal with those situations.
Do you see women as an important part of security, and do you see them as playing a different role in conflict resolution?
Absolutely, 100%. A lot of times when we consult with our clients and we're talking about their recruiting and hiring practices, there's this stereotypical idea of what a security guard should be. And like you described, it's normally the big beefy guy with a tight shirt with his arms crossed. And I encourage our clients to look elsewhere. Look for good communicators. Women are definitely a good idea to have as part of your security team because they bring a lot of times to a situation a different energy. Oftentimes, they can be great communicators to de-escalate a situation. I don't think you always have to look for size and some sort of physical ability to have a good security guard. I think it's oftentimes a cerebral, good communicator that makes a better security guard than what you might typically think. You also want to look for that person who's proactive, who is in the game, so to speak. You could have the biggest guy in the world sitting at your front door, but if he's engaged on his phone half the night, he's not much value to you because he's not proactively preventing issues from happening before they get started. So I think there needs to be a shift in what people perceive as good security, whether it be in size or gender or the way they look.
From your experience, from working with security and working with police, to what extent do you think that same philosophy has to occur to the police that work at night? And to what extent do you think that the diversity of the police in nightlife districts should be reflective of females and also the ethnic diversity of the community? And do you see if you don't have that could precipitate more conflicts?
Well, I think anytime you have people that speak different languages and they don't understand the language, or you don't understand the language, it's going to make it more frustrating. And frustration is probably the biggest aspect that I see that creates conflict. People don't understand what they need to do. And if you can't explain it, it becomes more dangerous. So to answer your question, women have a nurturing effect and are a lot more patient at times when dealing with frustrated people, and they can help them better than sometimes people that don't have the ability to have the patience they need to communicate what needs to be done. I think training helps to give people tools that they can solve the problems that people create mostly for themselves. But we're babysitters. We take care of people. People will come back if we take care of them. If we have an unsafe premises where people get hurt, they'll sue us. So you have to be aware of what's going on. How many people drink before they go out to nightclubs and bars, drinking at home or elsewhere? They're going to change, and they're people that can hold their liquor and be impaired and not show it. So we have to sort of be aware of a lot of what's going on, and the security staff has to communicate to the bartenders, waitstaff, and managers. And they all got to have one focus, and it's to take care of people. Now, if you stop service, they might get upset with you, but most of the time, and a lot of time, they'll come back and thank you for doing the right thing. And it's not always easy to do the right thing. But I honestly believe, Jim, the other thing is diversity that you were talking about. I think people are bonding and blending. I think diversity is that we're a mixed culture. It's not black, it's not white, it's not brown. It's a culture of people being together. And we have to bond and blend people together, hopefully by music and different cultures. So it's a training period that I think that we're going to be experiencing.
So where will insurance fit into this whole scheme of the reopening and the reemergence of that melting pot of a venue that you're talking about?
To answer your question, basically, with the social issues of conflict that have been, a lot of insurance companies are limiting the assault and battery coverage. So it's a dilemma of having enough money to buy insurance to protect people. And the issue is safety. You have to provide a background of safety to prevent the opportunity of unwanted risk.
We always advocate for in-house security. Some of this comes from personal experience. I think that it's two-sided. One, the owners don't properly vet outside security companies. So if we're bringing in a third-party security company, I don't think ownership spends the time to properly vet and communicate with that security company exactly what their expectations are. Another issue that we see is that if you have an outside security company, they're beholden to another employer. So oftentimes directives don't get carried out as an ownership would want. So on that front, we always like the idea of hiring directly, training directly. They answer to you in management. They have a better sense of what your objective is and what your overall philosophy is to ultimately add to that guest experience. Because I think, in hospitality, that's the most important thing, is allowing people to have a good time and enjoy their experience. But at the same time, there's situations in which there's no other choice but to augment your team with an outside party. But I think that ownership and the operators need to make sure that they clearly communicate and vet that business. One of the things that we face here in California is that you have to be a licensed guard in either your in-house position or if you hire from outside. And oftentimes we find that those who are quote unquote registered security guards don't have their full training in place. And that requirement, the onus is on the operator and the individual to make sure that's in place. And they don't learn about that until something happens. And then through discovery and say a civil case, and they find out that that guard hasn't maintained his training requirements.
Police officers have a greater duty of control than a doorman or a security person. They have a greater duty of care to give to customers too. So they can't win for losing in that situation, Jim. But I see that more of conflict situation at times. But I think cops have been the best thing to their presence to prevent the opportunity as a deterrent to unwanted behaviors.
We hope to see you in Washington, D.C. next year for our next in-person summit. Have a great day.